Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be checking out the Imperium's 10 Worst Jobs, Warhammer 40k Lore/History by Luetin09. Yes guys, this was recommended to me by our very own Eno over on the Discord. Big shout out to you sir. Figure, perfect time, might as well plug the Discord. Obviously, come on down, join the Discord guys. Be a part of our Legion today, be a part of the discussions. I love interacting with you guys there. Obviously, I do read the YouTube comments still. I always try to read the comments as much as I can. I might not always have time to respond to the comments here on YouTube, but just because there's so many usually now, but I do always read them, of course, so don't let that deter you from leaving a recommendation down in the comments. But come on down, join the Discord guys. It's a great time. I love seeing you all there. It's great interacting with you all, so come join the Discord guys. But yeah, we're going to be looking at the Imperium's 10 worst jobs. Now obviously, what does that mean? That means to me, right, listen, if I had to guess, just from what I've seen, the 10 worst jobs, servitors are pretty up there. Being a mindless fucking lobotomized slave, in a sense, is pretty bad. Man, obviously guardsmen too don't have it easy. You guys tell me that the average age of guardsmen is very, very low, obviously, because you're just such an expendable force, you know? You're treated as kind of fodder, in a sense, you know? What else, man? I'm trying to think here. Oh, fuck, what are they called? The assassins, Eversors? Eversors, is that what I'm thinking of? The dudes with the fucking skull masks, you know what I'm saying? And they basically fucking are used, like what are they? They're like mind trained in a sense, aren't they? And then they're fucking cryogenically frozen. They're frozen and then dropped into fucking battle, and they fucking obliterate whatever's around them. And I think they can target friendlies too if they're in the way. Like, they'll run fucking through a friendly if he's in the way, kind of thing. And they're just such a menacing fucking force on the battlefield. Those guys sound fucking awful, you know what I mean? Literally, because you're going to fucking die. Your combat stimmed up, you're on fucking hallucinogens, and you are fucking frozen all of your life until you are fucking unfrozen, dropped from orbit, and sent to kill everything around you. You know what I mean? And if you get captured, you're fucking going to, like, I don't know, explode or some shit, you know? I think they don't really get captured, do they? I think they just fucking, they off themselves usually, or like they have like a kill switch or something in them that makes capture impossible. Something like that. Not like they would ever, I don't think, fight with the level of indoctrination that they're on, you know, for the enemy side by any means, but goddamn, you know. But yeah, a couple really, really bad ones for sure. But yeah, guys, obviously leave a like, subscribe for more content from me if you enjoy, and yeah, leave your recommendations down in the comments below. Come join our Discord, guys. I appreciate seeing you guys there. And yeah, guys, without any further delay, let's get right into this video, because, man, I want to see if I actually haven't looked at any of this video or anything like that. So it'd be very interesting to see, oh, my shit fucked up there. Be very interesting to see if I was correct on any of those. When people forget their duty, they are no longer human. They become something less than beasts. They have no place in the bosom of humanity, nor in the heart of the Emperor. Let them die and be quickly forgotten. The worst Imperial jobs.
When we look at the lives of those serving the Imperium, we must also understand that it is assumed that all of their service is at the behest and honour of serving the Emperor of Man and the Imperium itself. Now, while the official line from the Administratum would be that to give yourself in whatever means are required for the betterment of the Imperium is a noble cause, just and above all else a required task, it's worth remembering that these people are still humans serving in the Imperium, not superhuman Hastatis or fanatical religious zealots, not cultish machine worshippers or drug-crazed hive gang members, just your average person trying to stay alive and do the best that they can. Now, while undoubtedly citizens of the Imperium know that they give to a greater cause and are indoctrinated from birth into the Imperial truth, at the same time you can't escape the harsh realities of some of the worst jobs imaginable for those poor saps who end up designated with such a plight in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium.
Yeah, and I must say on to that point, right? It's very indiscriminate, seemingly, who is assigned these really, really ass jobs, right? So you could just be, man, you could just be born a psyker, for example, on the wrong planet, and suddenly, next thing you know, you're a fucking servitor, as we saw, in a servitor's tale, by the way. Go check that out if you haven't. Got to plug that, of course. But yeah, in that video, I thought that was super interesting because that guy, to my knowledge, from what I could understand, was just a psyker, had latent psyker abilities. Obviously, I believe he was trained at a Mechanicus Academy, which obviously they don't take those things too well. Was turned into a servitor, but obviously still maintains some psyker abilities as a servitor in some fucked way. It was a very, very interesting story, very compelling. I love fucking Vox and the Void Servitor Tale. The narration on that was fantastic. I know it was a fan-made work, of course, but damn, that story really makes you think, and it's like it really goes to show just how fucking brutal all this is. So, man, yeah, I wonder. I really do wonder. I'm sure each of these fucking chapters is like a different job. I'm not gonna look at them, but yeah, I bet you a servitor is
also,
like
I think
one of
a
the first few ones on here. I'll bet money on
By our
it.
standards, most jobs in the Imperium are often not really what you would quantify as jobs. You might simply be compelled by your seniors toward a role that then becomes your lot in life. There's really no true unified or standardized currency system within the Imperium itself either. To do so would be challenging, if not impossible, given the distant scale and general instability of the Imperium as a whole. While hive cities, for example, may use credits within them, or other planets operate on a more basic bartering system, some even using coinage, there's also the throne gelt, which is likely as close to being a universal payment as exists, and this is often used by, say, rogue traders and inquisitors who are traveling between systems.
That's
Overall,
interesting.
though, there's no unified...
That's actually a good point. We all talk about 40k, right? But we don't talk about the economy of 40k. We talk about the logistics a lot, but not the economy. Yeah, I guess he just kind of said that, right? Coinage, it all depends on where you live, but like the gelt, the imperial gelt, is that what it's called? Is that like a universal accepted currency in a sense? Like, because obviously I'm assuming the Eldar, why would they give a fuck about any sort of Imperium money? You know what I mean? Like, I guess, yeah, in the sense of rogue traders, if you're trying to do like barter, perhaps, if you really, really need something, maybe. But like, yeah, why would, a lot of Xenos races, orcs, they use teeth as fucking currency. You know what I'm saying? They don't care about no money, no Imperium coin, So it's like, yeah, what does the Imperium run off of largely? Like, I guess, yeah, there's really no standard depending on the world. It's interesting, you don't really talk about the economy a lot in 40k.
Which is likely as close to being a universal payment as exists, and this is often used by, say, rogue traders and inquisitors who are traveling between systems. Overall, though, there's no unified economic system. It's all based on tithes and requirements for the Imperium's needs. It's all fairly inconsistent. While some jobs are paid and unpaid, it's often unlikely that you're going to have a literal choice in what your assigned lot in life is. People aren't going to be going out to school and then choosing a vocation, although obviously for some jobs, some roles, some level of moderate education is required so that you can best interact with the materials and data slates that you're having to handle. But you as an individual are an unimportant speck in the grand scheme of the Imperium, and you will do what is required of you, because that is your reality. Moreover, most of the Imperium trades in commodities. This can be raw materials, military hardware, and very often humans. So more than likely you are an asset and will be utilized however the Imperium sees it. The best way to visualize currency in the Imperium is that it's all system specific for the most part. And within a hive, for one, you are likely never going to leave, and so its credit system would be very specific to that location. There's no need for it to exist outside of that. Think of it like company money. You get paid by the person you're working for, who then also happens to simultaneously produce all of your other requirements. So you then are being paid by and paying back into that same company. It's a good way to basically regulate what the citizenry are using and ensure that everybody gets their fair or perhaps basic requirement share of things.
That's very interesting. Yeah, so it's like each planet in a sense kind of operates off of its own like closed economy, and when I guess that makes sense given like the logistics of 40k, because again, like if you were to try to have like again, like a universal money between all the worlds, inflation would be like, could you imagine inflation, what we have today? Bro, you'd have like fucking 2 billion credits, and yeah, that's just like, it's a bagel, actually. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, I could understand that, because like your money would be worthless in a sense, assuming you could get more of it easily, you know what I'm saying? And obviously, with how many worlds on the grand scheme of things, think about how much like fraud and shit would be going on. You'd be like, you just need somebody that's a little tech savvy, and you'd be able to fucking siphon like so much coinage off of people. So yeah, or off of like the Imperium itself. Obviously, I'm sure they would, do a lot to you if they found out about that. But like, still, figure it'd be pretty easy to do, given like the bureaucratic incompetency of the Imperium itself.
Now, you think you've got a worse 40k job in mind? Well, throw it down in the comments, and maybe I'll include it in part 2 of this if I do a follow-up. And if you guys enjoy this...
Also, guys, I realized there is a part 2 now, because he mentions that. Leave a like if you want a part 2. Leave a like, let me know in the comments if you want a part 2.
And we open it up to even some more loose speculation for different parameters and different aspects of Warhammer 40,000. This could become an ongoing, accompanying series. So now, in no actual order of horror, to begin with, servitors. Now, for reasons we won't get into here, within the Imperium, any advanced state of artificial intelligence is aggressively
not a servitor,
outlawed.
yeah.
So instead, the ever-ingenious humanity of the future has found a fantastic solution to get around this problem, because we are, after all, always such great problem solvers. The solution? Well, as is always the case, there is a plentiful supply of human plebs, criminals, and general undesirables. So how about we part lobotomize them, hopefully they get the gift of being mind-wiped, and then fuse what's left of their still living but now eviscerated carcasses into a somewhat functional cyborg. It's not really AI, and it's not really human. Problem solved, everybody's happy. Except likely the unwilling participants of becoming a servitor. Servitors are a vital part of the Imperium.
Is this the first job? Is it servitor? Yeah, servitors, that's the chapter we're on. Okay,
for humans to want to take on the role. Although if no servitor were available and push comes to shove, you know that somebody's going to have to install that hyper-dangerous fuel system, and it's not going to be any officer types.
Yeah.
While servitors are questionably necessary, they are a sad and incredibly depressing portrait of the dark future. And it's very questionable, given the fairly immoral state of humanity in the 41st millennium, just how well lobotomized these individuals are if they're not mind-wiped.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Like, you're painting the picture... Like, I get the grimdark aspect of it, dude, but it's also just like, goddamn, like, you're fighting for the survival of your species, I think, at the end of the day, right? That's what it is. That's how they justify it, I think, in a sense, right? Because obviously, like, the shit they do to themselves, the Imperium, it's awful, right? Shit we see certain Astartes have done in the past, or even in the present, certain individuals in high power, on a whim, fucking, exterminatus scene fucking worlds, just because, like, they think it'll help. It's like, shit like that, they're doing it because they believe that their survival of their species is at risk, and this is the only way to do it. I can understand that, but holy shit, if it's like, what future are you fighting for at that point? When you're willing to risk your own people in such a way, And I get it's like undesirables, criminals, but sometimes it's really not, you know what I mean? What is an undesirable in the Imperium, An undesirable, again, anyone that's not touting the party line, anyone that's different of thought, you know what I'm saying? Like, I imagine an undesirable akin to, like, what fucking the Soviet Union deemed like an undesirable, quote unquote, for example. You know what I'm saying? A free thinker, anyone willing to think outside the box, we don't want you here. You know what I'm saying? We're going to send you away forever. In fact, you're not even going to remember who you are by the time we're done with you. That's the kind of level the Imperium's on. They don't, because obviously the heresy happened, right? It's an interesting thing. It's a deep, deep rabbit hole. You know what I'm saying? The heresy happened, all that happened. I can see why, okay? But also, I believe servitors, and unless, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe servitors were in use even before the heresy. So it's not even really like a justification for it in a sense, Like, it's a hard one.
Servitors, while carrying out their instructed functions if left to their own devices, have been seen to become confused and disorientated, sometimes found in a lost corner of a starship or missing in the maze of a hive city, babbling to themselves with a sea of incomprehensible speech, with perhaps some scant details of their former selves and former lives, perhaps trying to formulate some cognition or sense of who they were before. Worse still, we hear stories of people who undergo surgery appearing to be under anesthetic, but are in fact just paralyzed and fully conscious. So it broaches the possibility that some or even many servitors are actually fully aware of the lives they are living and with full awareness and memory of even their former lives, but who then simply lack the ability to speak or even control their own bodies, trapped in a silent, monotonous, and potentially unending agony in the prisons they have been physically melded into. One of probably the most common and unpleasant tasks to partake in within the Imperium would be working in its vast factories. Now, planets with hive cities will usually be spattered with important resources, and their factories will then churn out any number of processed materials necessary for the functioning of their hive and or required by order of the Imperium off-world.
Right, and I think that's interesting. Okay, yeah, so second one here, manufactorium. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because obviously, you know, I'm sure workplace safety is not a fucking high concern in the Imperium, and you have to remember just the constructs, the fucking implements of warfare that they're building, right? When you're building a Titan, you know, how do you build that motherfucker? You got some guys up there on some scaffolding, fucking, you know, painting on the heraldry, and someone slips off. You know, whatever. Fucking, you know, it's shit like that, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure it's really not of high concern to them. So, yeah, I assume missing hands, limbs. Yeah, I assume it's a very dangerous business to get into.
The administrators and governors will not care how these orders are fulfilled, only that they are completed on time as required. This subsequently means the conditions for workers are just about as awful as you could imagine. Toxic, acrid air, long 20-hour shifts, token pay, and squalid, cramped living conditions. Still, for most people at this level of society, it's probably the best they could hope for. Upward mobility is not a thing, and the only other options being to slip into vagrancy and an underhive of horrors. Even then, this is a class of citizen who no one will blink an eye if somebody goes missing for whatever horrible reason, and still grinding day after day in a factory of hot, dangerous, and likely condemning you to a slow, agonizing death as your body is ravaged by fulfilling your work quota, coupled with the slow poisoning it receives every day, is hardly an appealing alternative, but it's the best that many can hope for. An Imperial Guardsman. Now, while a Guardsman is obviously an honourable and respected role for those in the Imperium, because frankly anybody forced to face down a 40-foot-high lumbering alien killing machine who will in all likelihood either cleave you in two, strip the skin from your body leaving you running around screaming like a skinned animal, or just bludgeon you to a pulp, or maybe bombard you with projectiles full of acidic, boring maggots, deserves a reasonable level of respect, even if that service was in fact non-consensual. As with many military roles in the Imperium, Guardsmen serve with a duality of horrific warfare experience coupled with unceasing immortal honor. Because of the extreme casualty rates, most Guardsmen are equipped with simply a lasgun, because why give them more than that when they're not going to be around to use it? A lasgun being a weapon often referred to as a flashlight because of its extremely poor effectiveness against the severe threats faced by the Imperium. Other heavy weaponry for its soldiers are available, as well as some devastating...
That's so interesting. You would think, and obviously I get the idea of they're not going to be around long enough, let's not arm them, but you would think that they would at least give them something just a little bit more powerful. Like, if they have the capability to, obviously, and you do see... human troops with obviously special heavy weapons, as well as like obviously like Cadian shock troop and shit like that, you know. They're better equipped for sure. Obviously a Deathcore Kree, not necessarily better equipped, but they definitely have their own kind of tactics and use of their equipment. I guess it's a bit different, you know what I'm saying? Obviously, like, you know, they do visibly look different. They have those horses that aren't really horses, and they have like some other stuff about them, but they are generally the same in terms of equipment. They just utilize their shit in a different style, in a sense, you know what I'm saying? Same like the Cadians do. Same kind of equipment, better equipped in their case, but same rough kind of equipment, and they utilize it in a more organized, well-trained manner. You know what I'm saying? if that's to my understanding correct.
Other heavy weaponry for its soldiers are available, as well as some devastatingly powerful tanks, ordnance, and air support, but for your average man on the ground, bad luck, you get the lasgun.
Yeah.
While Imperial propaganda will tell the glory of serving in the Imperium, the reality is fairly disconnected from this stirring and glorifying rhetoric. The phrase battle of attrition comes quickly to mind for many guardsmen who will not receive much if any personal body armour, unlike their superhuman Hastatis saviours. Nope, you're going into battle with the shirt on your back, and as an individual, no one is going to be stopping to help you when you lose a limb or worse. And the word expendable will be very much on your commander's lips. Now, if it isn't bad enough that you're facing a nightmarish host of Xenos, your commissar will be standing right behind you, ready to kill you or your newfound friends on the slightest hint of your hesitation, or perhaps simply to just motivate those around you. Unless you have qualified for a specialist division or an elite force within the Guard, you're more than likely going to become Operation Human Shield. And if by some miracle you manage to survive the horrific conditions of battling alien horrors with little more than a gun that shoots light, having watched many around you die in the most unbearable of circumstances, and then still have your sanity intact, not to mention hopefully not having your body be completely broken, there's nothing to say that an orbiting Astartes or Inquisition may not simply decide that things are not going quite as well as they'd expected, and decide that in fact an orbital bombardment might best serve the fast resolution of the situation.
So on that point though, that being said, people will say the lasgun's shit. I'm sure it's... I've been heard by today's standards, it would be good, but in the 40k universe, it's bad. That being said, if you're fighting like an unarmored enemy, right? So I'm sure certain Tyranid types are unarmored. Orcs, obviously the lower ranks of orcs, if they're not like fucking big boys yet, they might not be wearing the most armor, and even if they are, their scrap is not going to stop a lasgun shot for the most part, to my knowledge. So you can definitely still stack some bodies with a lasgun. Like I think just calling it a flashlight, like it's still a fucking lasgun, you know, it'll still hurt you. It'll still definitely put a motherfucker down if you need to. So I think that's not really doing it justice in a sense. Obviously, in comparison, yes. In comparison, absolutely. When you're dealing with shit in 40k, yeah, a lasgun's fucking baby shit. But like against the lowest, like lowest v lowest, it's an effective weapon, you know what I'm saying? It's not bad. It'll do the job, you know what I mean? And, you know, if it's a gigantic enemy, I mean, ideally you have 100,000 lasguns shooting at it. So that gotta do something, right? Like, I'm sure. Come on now, gotta do something.
In fact, an orbital bombardment might best serve the fast resolution of the situation, and your service is appreciated, Guardsmen. If you feel like you're having a bad day and want to voice your concerns to those around you, this is not advisable.
Don't do it.
Commissars will be standing by to silence you for potentially damaging unit morale, but like so many aspects of the Imperium, the most hollow element is the fact that in serving your family, your planet, and your Imperium, you will not be remembered, and will be 100% left behind if the situation warrants it. You will not be receiving a flashy service, or your family informed of your demise. You are but one of millions upon millions of soldiers, and while some planets are focused around specialist skills and military training, many more are unwitting or even unwillingly drafted. You will not receive special genetic engineering. You get your gun, your orders, and a direction to advance. Now get on with it, Guardsmen, before your own officer shoots you for failure to follow command.
Wow.
Next, in direct contrast, is the dull monotony of bureaucracy. You are the grease and oil in the machine as an administrative scribe. While many lives in the Imperium are pain-ridden and lives of frustrating physical agony, there is an argument to be made that endless perpetual administration is equally unbearable. The role of an administrator or an administrative scribe is to perpetually carry out tasks that must seem simply entirely pointless in the grand scheme of things. Your daily tasks lost amid a vast ocean of information. Your whole being lost in reams and reams of paper trails, and even the purpose and intent of your tasks are potentially lost to meaning, or possibly even no longer required, having been long forgotten about. Billions of clerks, scribes, and general admin staff work tirelessly to manage the Imperium at every tier. Compared to others, this may seem like a sweet job to land yourself, but imagine having to do the same thing every day, without end, without opportunity, and without meaning. In many respects, it's the closest thing to hell for many. Pointless tasks.
I imagine, pointless tasks, exactly. Like, there must be so much, again, like, with the bureaucracy of the Imperium, there must just be so much bullshit that on the grand scale makes zero difference and doesn't matter. Like, you know what I'm saying? But obviously it's needed. The way they're doing it is pretty radical, though. Like, that machine that dude's plugged into, goddamn.
Out meaning. In many respects,
it's like the librarian on crack right there, dude.
For many. Pointless tasks with no thanks or appreciation, no sense of really contributing anything to the greater whole, cold, harsh working conditions, still subject to the same brutal rules and regulations that dictate all Imperial life. Indeed, the very nature of the complex bureaucracy that is strictly enforced allows little room for error. Regulations, forms, protocols, and process is your life. Worse, perhaps, is to live a life of blind ignorance of the goings-on beyond the walls and confines of your endless daily data processing. Many administrative positions are considered hereditary as well, so you'll be committed to a life of permanent placement facing logic engines and cogitator workstations. For an administratum scribe working in their specific sub-departments, all must be recorded, catalogued, completed in quadruplet, processed, and then as long as centuries later, finally archived. The whole process is grindingly slow and dull beyond the strongest possible interpretation of the word. And as a final insult, you must fulfill your role accurately and efficiently for the entirety of your servitude. Failure to do so risks intervention by the Inquisition. Administrative departments
the Inquisition will be on your ass instantly.
Level of efficiency, or worse, make a catalogue of errors, may be subject to mass summary executions by Inquisitors for crimes against the Imperium.
Holy
As a simple
shit.
cog in a machine, you could also unknowingly participate in a scheme of upward conspiracy and corruption and be judged for this without even having been aware of doing so. A thankless, soul-destroying job where you'll likely never see anything beyond the incarcerated walls of your administrative vault sector.
Jesus.
Now, the human batteries, otherwise known as psychers, used to fuel the Emperor atop of his golden throne.
Obviously, we know about psychers in 40k. They usually have the short end of the stick by a lot. Like, even if you are a high-level psyker and you are the best you can be, guess what? You're probably going to be a princeps of a titan, and your soul is going to be fucking merged with an AI eventually. You know what I'm saying? Like a god engine AI. So it's like, that's at like a high level. Obviously, you obviously have, what are they called? Astropaths, I believe they're called. Like the navigators aboard ships and whatnot that allow you to actually enter the warp and that can see the Astronomicon, I believe. You have a lot of different psyker roles. Obviously, in Astartes, the very first one we saw there, plug to that video too, go watch that if you haven't. We saw a psyker actually get fucking overtaken by a warp beast, in a sense, you know? So obviously, there's plenty of risks that come with being a psyker, or you just get turned into a servitude, depending on what planet, or servitor, depending on what planet, you're born on. So very short end of the stick for the most part, from what I can see.
Human batteries, otherwise known as psychers, used to fuel the Emperor atop of his golden throne. Unsanctioned psychers are continually hunted by the Imperium, and when discovered they will likely be transported off-world to return to Terra in what are referred to as the much-feared Black Ships. As an unsanctioned psyker, you'll be assigned to one of two roles for the Imperium: training to a full operating psyker or a psychic human battery to fuel the Emperor and the Astronomican's daily required injection of psychic power. Unsanctioned psychers represent a great threat to populations as they run the risk of unwittingly becoming a portal for demonic incursion. And those imprisoned within its cavernous, permanently dark, freezing cold holds on the journey back to Terra, with thousands of other unfortunate members being probably the most harrowing part of the ordeal, as these untrained psychers will expel their panicked and fraught emotions all around them. As such, only the most mentally strong Sisters of Silence will crew these vessels so as to be able to withstand the constantly soul-numbing despair of the incarcerated amateur psychers. For the majority of these poor souls, upon reaching Terra itself, their fate will be psychic disintegration as they're consumed by the Emperor and the Astronomicon, their very mind, soul and body being consumed in agonizing psychic fire, and their bodies and brains are burned to ashes. But it does keep the Imperium's lighthouse lit for another day at least.
That's fair.
An unpleasant...
But it's also not. Like, do you guys think, honestly, so your guys' little opinion piece here, do you guys think that the Emperor would actually condone that kind of behavior? Obviously, we saw him do it with, who was it, Melchidor, I believe? Maybe that name is incorrect. His right hand at the time of the heresy. Maybe I got his name incorrect there. I'm trying to recall. But either way, we obviously saw it with him. He broke down over time. By time the Emperor was able to take the throne, he basically was entirely gone. Do you guys think that the Emperor would support that sacrifice daily? I'm assuming yes. From my perspective, I'm assuming he absolutely would be fine with it, because we've seen him sacrifice plenty of humans before on his own accord, and he didn't really give a shit about it. You know what I'm saying? Because it's for the greater good to him, right? In a sense. So, yeah, I think he'd probably be fine with it, in my opinion. But let me know what you guys think.
Lighthouse lit for another day at least. An unpleasant but perhaps at least highly appreciated task to carry out in your service for the Imperium is that of refueling a starship warp drive. And this has scant documentation on who specifically carries out this role, but it is described as being similar to a funeral procession. Those chosen to carry out the task will begin by leaving an airlock to cross the service deck of a ship, wearing robes of grey metallic thread connected up with valves of long cabling, all wearing thick lead gloves as they carry their heavy metal caskets upon their shoulders. The service staff's eyes, nose and mouth will be similarly fitted with these connective valves, the unknown material they carry within these caskets evidently being extremely hazardous, for as these individuals cross to their objective, their flesh, skin will slowly cook and be burned away.
Jesus.
This process being described by tech priests as the most perilous operation a vessel could undertake, barring actual combat. As the procession of staff would approach the warp drive central column, the casket carriers would become even further physically damaged and even start to disintegrate, but being driven perhaps by the chemicals and gases being infused into them as pain suppressors and some chemical concoctions to enable them to carry out such a task, they lumber forward. But the closer the carriers come to the drive itself, the more they begin to stagger and their metallic robes deteriorate.
Jesus.
They've infused chemicals keeping them barely standing as their bodies begin to quite literally fall apart, chunks of flesh and matter falling from their person as they push on to deliver their fuel to the drive. The casket would be finally pushed into a socket of the drive column as some of the carrier's limbs would detach and strips of muscle and bone hang down from their gaping robes. Servitor-like machines would collect the remains of the carriers and scrape these into yet more caskets before tech priests offer prayers to the machine god. With the last great effort, the final casket bearers would load their fuel into the drive before the doors would rapidly shut. The robed shells would now be retracted to the entry point, and the ship's captain might be heard to utter, "Emperor, preserve us," before finally turning away from the harrowing scene playing out on the engineering deck of their starship.
That's fucked. So I wonder, they don't just use servitors for that job, do they? I'd assume they would, but by the sounds of it, no. So that's interesting. You know what I'm saying? Why would you send your engineering staff to go do that? Unless it's just like a prisoner or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Then I guess, okay, sure. But what a fucking awful way to go out. Like, that sounds fucking genuinely fucked. You know you're going to die for certain, and you're going to decay rapidly while you're doing it. That's so fucked, you know? That's definitely one of the worst ones, honestly, I think we've heard. This one here, feudal peasant.
Imagine life in something like the 13th century, essentially the Middle Ages, where anything like 90% of the population spend all of their time every day working the land. This is life on a feudal world. There are a few citizens with specific jobs working stone and metals, but your average person's life is doomed to endless hard labour. This physically destroying job is carried out from dawn to dusk, year-round, with the populace likely surviving on a meagre supply of its own productivity. A high mortality rate of disease and infection, industrial accidents from primitive machinery or domestic complications, like no medicine to prevent women from dying in childbirth. This all in and of itself sounds hard enough of a life, but imagine, if you will, the job of a feudal gong farmer. Now, what is this scintillating job?
Yeah,
well,
I've
it's
heard of
collecting
them.
the mess of medieval latrines and cesspits,
Yeah.
bringing it manually outside of a city or a town to be used as fertilizer for farming. You do get the privilege of searching through the waste if you choose to find any valuables, and by the way, you also have to work only during the night. And here's hoping you don't pass out from the fumes you're inhaling and potentially drown in the stuff you're having to rake out every night. And for those on a feudal world, to top it off, an Imperial administrator will be watching from an orbital platform, and that's about all the defenses your planet has. So let's hope no blood-crazed orcs, hungry tyrannids, or immoral demons come wandering by.
Yeah, I imagine feudal worlds would be like, they're not going to put up any sort of a fight to any sort of Xenos race, or even if the Imperium wanted to come shoot some, like, it's a feudal society. If they do have guns, it's very limited. Otherwise, I'm sure, yeah, it's largely medieval society tech for the large part, you know? So, yeah, they defenseless. Your planet would get ravaged instantly. There'd be no hope for you, really. Yeah, so I could see what he's saying there, yeah.
If you thought working a feudal planet or in a factory for material processing in a hive was bad, don't be so ungrateful, citizen. You have a privileged life compared to those poor souls working in agri-processing. While this is going to vary from hive planet to planet, some of the worst of this is processing what's referred to as corpse starch and ration biscuits, both unpleasant in their own way. As populations for the massive ecologies known as hive cities become quite simply ridiculous, housing anything between 10 and 100 billion citizens, the need for sustenance is obviously difficult to provide for. And while you may be lucky enough to save up your credits and purchase a delicious chunk of rat meat, you're more than likely going to be enjoying some delicious ration bars or corpse starch. But how do workers produce such luxuries? Well, ration bars are best described as horribly greasy, generally unpopular, shockingly, and are biscuit bars to feed workers, serfs, and military forces. They're manufactured by harvesting bio-rich matter from ocean planets and worlds with seas, which then provides a protein-rich gruel. This, though, would be not enough to provide for the billions of citizens, so it must be instead fed to larvae of the Orochian bilefly. And when these larvae reach an optimal stage in their life cycle, when they're plump enough, the larvae are going to be pulped by workers and compressed down into the hard-to-stomach biscuit ration bars.
Ew.
The agri-workers doing this process will work in huge air-sealed pens that produce these plump fat larvae. If you're working in one of these places, then things are not going to be going well for you. And you're probably quite low down in your hive city, as the stench and endless droning vibrations and material mechanical sounds of the bileflies is not one that many would choose to live with. Still though, it could be worse. You could be producing corpse starch, which is about as appealing as it sounds. This material is bland, filling, and relatively nutritious because it's basically reconstituted biomatter mixed with animals, plants, discarded organics, and of course rumoured to include human corpses as well. While this is undoubtedly frowned upon by various administrative departments of the Imperium, it's one of those things that a planetary governor is going to either sweep under the rug, play down, or full-on cover up. It's not out and out a disclosed ingredient, but highly suspected that one way the population are able to be adequately fed is the mechanical reclamation of human biomatter, albeit then diluted by various other organic materials. It's like so many things in the Imperium, on the borderline of being acceptable. And when faced with limited options for feeding the population,
that would be acceptable at all.
Being violent food riots, then it becomes a necessary evil.
I guess, but goddamn, like again, what are you fighting for if you're eating, like if you're cannibalizing your own people? Are you better than a fucking Xenos at that point? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, it's like one of those arguments, bro. I don't know. That's a hard one to stomach.
Pity though the workers who have to work in the stinking immoral environment where you must process endless stinking vats of biomatter, perhaps seeing some things that are going to be difficult to forget as you catch your eager 4 hours of rest before getting back into the production line. Now I am yet to cover the assassins of the Imperium, but one aspect
I called that out, didn't I?
To work as an Imperial assassin is their pre-training. Now, as with most Imperial roles...
So again, I think I called out the Eversor assassins, didn't I? At the start of the video, I'm pretty sure. Fuck. Yeah, man. Again, I don't know if it's the right one that I was thinking of, like exactly right, but man, that's interesting. Yeah, I just assume like what they have to go through. Again, he says they're pre-training. Awful shit, you know what I'm saying? I can't imagine like almost a worse fate, because you're just getting indoctrinated, fucking fed drugs all day, and sent to go killed. You live literally to kill at that point.
It's quite unpleasant.
No personality.
But
Yeah.
specifically, the role of the Eversa Temple, which disturbingly leans towards using the youngest recruits, as they are less developed and therefore easier to bioadapt later in surgery. To start off with, most recruits will be orphans from a death world, of which there are quite unsurprisingly a plentiful supply in the Imperium. These recruits, after some base training, will be transported to Terra, but en route they will continue to be trained by a survival of the fittest assessment. These very young recruits will engage in what can best be described as an ongoing battle royale of wills, initiative, and resolve. Recruits are required to survive on minimal food, even minimal oxygen, for days on end, as well as continual forced fighting between themselves. This could be armed, unarmed, in near total darkness, or distracting aural and lighting conditions. Heat, cold, varying levels of gravity from the thin to the severe all will be factors in their assessment. When they eventually reach Terra, there could be anything below 1/10 of the original number of recruits who have survived this harrowing ordeal, or perhaps not at all if their assessors deem them unsatisfactory to requirements. Recruits, though, will then be organised by the temple they are best suited for. Eversa assassin recruits face, though, the further horror of being now forcibly bioengineered. These youngest recruits, who are essentially children, will be turned through this process into unstoppable drug-fueled killing machines. To achieve this, the Medicus adepts will use a range of genetic adaptation, endoskeletal restructuring, bionic implants, and infusions of chemicals to turn the previously human youth into a nightmarish weapon that can barely be controlled.
It is essentially like cybernetic augmentation and biological enhancement in a sense. I didn't realize that. I thought it was almost purely just indoctrination, which sounds fucking silly given the context of everything. I don't know why I thought that, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. They're actually, and they are drugged up for sure. Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot more sense.
To turn the previously human youth into a nightmarish weapon that can barely be controlled by its own leaders. Their cerebral cortex will also be enhanced and the brain fitted with lobo chips. These will amplify the assassin's state of mind to either raging hate, pure determination, or extreme fanatical drive for the love of the Imperium at any cost. This whole process is unpleasant and far from risk-free. Many subjects will die of massive multi-organ collapse as their bodies struggle to handle the severe restructuring. And this is not to mention the inevitable side effects from being turned into a bioenhanced, drug-fueled, borderline if not psychotic killing machine. Past this point, the assassin will continually attempt to balance the complex cocktail of chemicals that's fueling and simultaneously poisoning their system. Finally, at the end of all this, the assassin will be placed in cryosuspension, their bodies so drug-fueled and their own mindset so completely unstable that it's easier than keeping them actively conscious. Before a mission, they're going to be placed into a drop pod and then fired down to achieve their task. Becoming an Eversa assassin is likely one of the worst jobs in the Imperium, as your life is nothing but soul-destroying pain and servitude to be stripped of everything you were and used as an indiscriminate weapon of the Imperium. Now, penal legions are the dregs of Imperial society, so you can imagine...
So obviously, I didn't realize they had penal legions. That's interesting, because I would assume that if worse comes to worse, they would either be made servitum, what are they called? The Mechanicus ground forces. They're still lobotomized, I believe, just not as much. The Mechanicus, like, basic ground force. I forget the name of them. That's my bad. But I assume they would either be turned into those, I guess. But obviously Imperium is Imperium. Or just, like, straight up just sent to the Guard. Because fuck it, right? But, like, because the Guard is already expendable, right? So I'm assuming these might not be combat troops, the Penal Legion. Perhaps it's something else.
Now, penal legions are the dregs of Imperial society, so you can imagine these are some less than capable individuals. These are usually members of the Imperial Guard and PDF who have perhaps not been executed on the spot for their crimes and instead commuted to a life sentence in the loosest definition of the word. However, a penal legion can be easily made up of murderers, maniacs, thieves, in general criminal elements of society, or just those who were far too incompetent in their duties and have been sentenced to play some more mildly useful role for the Imperium. These legions, though, unfortunately, are basically the waste dump of human society and are forced to wear explosive slave collars that are more about turning the troops into human bombs than a disciplinary incentive. They march in a shambolic way towards their goal, or perhaps run if they're crazed, and then perhaps to just encourage those around them with whatever they're meant to be doing. Maybe a few of them will be blown up and detonated here and there. But is this the job we're talking about? Well, no. In fact, what we're actually sparing a thought toward are those tasked with maintaining control over these plebs. Penal Legion overseers essentially have the unfortunate task of herding a bunch of shambolic, potentially murderous and psychopathic cats. Some of the Penal Legion will relish their role and accept their death running headlong into the enemy, but others may fall into mental ruin, just falling to the floor crying, unable to move. Others may try to run away or simply just lash out and kill those standing around them. As frustratingly soul-destroying as such a task is, those commanding a Penal Legion are usually well versed in dealing out punishment, cruelty and incentives to their force, and will lay down brutal levels of discipline. Despite this professionalism,
they're already used to literally be human bombs. Like, what would be extra punishment on top of that to these guys? I feel like the overseers might have it, like, they definitely have a risky job for sure. But again, this is an expendable force. You can kind of do with them as you see fit, in a sense, right? They already have explosive slave collars on, for Christ's sake, you know? So that's interesting. That's an interesting choice.
Lay down brutal levels of discipline. Despite this professionalism, though, it's still likely one of the most frustrating roles to have to command in, with a force who are potentially just as happy killing each other and themselves as they are the enemy. So now to finish, I'm going to have to break your
unknown horrors.
But the truest worst job that could exist in 40k is, well, whatever you can draw from your own imagination. Because this might seem like a cop-out, but it's actually the real bedrock of 40k, because while it has embedded canon and non-canon lore, it's also a world whereby you as a participant are encouraged to use your own imagination. The civilian life of the dark future is very...
Not to pause on that, but Games Workshop gives me a different feeling, you know, with some of the stuff that they do, you know, use your own imagination. Seen a lot of people do that and them not get the thanks that they deserve, let's say. That's just my opinion, though. Maybe that's a hot take, but I know what he's trying to say, though. I get what he's trying to say.
Are encouraged to use your own imagination. The civilian life of the dark future is very poorly documented, and really we only have scraps of information compared to the endless raging warfest that is ongoing between various factions. The civilian life of the Imperium is perhaps one of the most interesting aspects that exists in the 40k universe, and if Games Workshop will not expand upon it, maybe it's time we start doing so ourselves with some wild speculations and imaginings. The whole thing with 40k is that the Imperium itself is so fractured and spread across countless systems with vast distances in between, it's really hard to focus in on some of the details of different worlds. Now this has happened very, very slowly over time with little fragments of information, but some could be, for example, nightmarish gulags, while others could be verdant, lush garden worlds of pleasure. Others could be more Earth-like with all the complex goings-on of human life that this entails, or you could be living in a horrific hive city or toxic choking forge world. Or how about a planet that's being cut off from the Imperium due to a simple administrative error, forced to go its own way with the vague hope of one day being rediscovered if it's not destroyed by some other alien process in the meanwhilest.
Yeah,
and this for me is one of
suck.
the most enjoyable parts of Warhammer 40,000. You can use your own imagination to build a whole narrative given the existing lore and framework of the factions within it. Often the world of 40k draws on real-world history, and it's something that I really love the idea of doing in creating whole descriptions of planets and locations that are non-canon and entirely fictional. Perhaps this is something I'll find time to do, perhaps it's something you guys would be interested in me doing. In the meanwhile, worst jobs canon or not, tell me down below what's the worst thing you can come up with. I'm probably going to regret asking that, but let's see. As always guys, thanks for watching and thank you for your support. I'll see you in the next one.
Each man executed is a man who can no longer serve, and to fail in service is to the is to the Emperor is to the greatest of sins. Lehman Russ said that, wow. Fucking guy. Wow, guys. Well, that was the Imperium's 10 Worst Jobs, Warhammer 40k Lore/History by Luetin09. Big thank you again to Eno, yes, Eno, for that recommendation. I appreciate that a lot, man. Thought that was a great video. It adds a little bit more context to the world and expands upon some of the jobs that we've heard of, obviously. And I loved a little bit of, like, I guess, lore building, like obviously the Manufactorium, learning a little bit more about the logistics side of things, just what the average civilian might have to go through in the world of 40k, because obviously we've seen a lot of Astartes, we've seen a lot of combat forces, but what does the average life look like, you know, for the civilian of 40k? I think that's a very interesting thing, and I think that's a thing that not a lot of people are focused on, you know what I'm saying? Like not a lot of people pay thought to. So I think that's really interesting, you know, to learn a little bit more about that. Obviously, again, guardsmen, I guess, servitors, I guess, and I believe the eversors, I guessed, yeah. The rest of these I did not guess. Ship refueling, that sounds fucking genuinely awful. That sounds like probably the worst, just because it's like a for sure, like you're fucked, like, you know what I mean? It is a death sentence, quite literally a death sentence. But you could argue that like penal or eversor is also kind of a death sentence. So is guardsmen, I guess. So is... all of them are kind of death sentences, but like, man, ship refueler, it's like a for sure death sentence, and you're going out in a really bad way, you know what I'm saying? So like they're scraping you off the fucking floor. Like that's bad. That's not a way I would like to go out, you know what I'm saying? I'd rather get chopped in half by an orc or something, you know? Like I feel like there's at least a little bit more glory to be had in that, but oh well, you know. But yeah, guys, big thank you to our members, all the Hastati out there. Big thank you to the new members out there, and our Triarii Paralyzed Tortoise. Big thank you to you guys. I appreciate that a lot. You guys inspire me to make more content for you every single day. And again, I can't thank you guys enough for that. Leave a like, subscribe for more content from me, and leave your recommendations down in the comments below. Come join our Discord, be a part of the discussions, and yeah, come join our Legion today, guys. It's great to see you there. But yeah, guys, without any further delay, this has been Centurion, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace, guys.